There's a couple of hecklers out on the road there, and in the words of Marsha P. Johnson, what does the P stand for? Pay no mind! Hello everyone, I want to keep my remarks brief, because what we came here today to demand is very simple. We demand an end to the killing of trans people, full stop. We are demanding survival. Can you believe it? We are demanding survival. The statistics are unacceptable, and we are imploring all people of conscience to take action now to defend trans lives, and especially the lives of trans women of color who face transphobia at the intersection of racism and sexism. When Ben and I, a number of weeks ago, had discussions about organizing this event, we talked a long time on the phone, and we agreed that as white trans-masculine brothers, we need to do a better job of holding each other accountable in our work to addressing the fact that we live in a racist, woman-hating society. 3 of the 4 trans women murdered in the last several weeks are women of color, as folks have said: Vicky Gutierrez, Celine Walker, and Tonya Harvey. Black and brown trans lives matter. Black and brown trans lives matter. Black and brown trans lives matter. And we must also say loud and clear, time's up on racism and trans misogyny. Time's up! Time's up! Time's fucking up! So we're here demanding survival as trans people, and we're here demanding respect for our right to mourn and rage and act up and fight back in defense of our lives and of our community. This is about survival in a time when doing so is proving very difficult, and attacks and tragedies seem to be around every corner. And by tragedy, I mean the vitriolic, senseless, explosive white supremacy and transphobia. Now, I don't have all the numbers in front of me because there really are very few resources dedicated to collecting data on things other than how many of us have been murdered, how many of us have taken our own lives, how many of us have contemplated taking our own lives. But let me say this, and I think other folks have made this point. Most trans people I know are living with at least one other person, roommates or partners, who don't really respect them. And they're living with those folks just in order to stay off the street. And most trans folks I know have a hard time landing their most recent job, if they indeed have a job. We all, I think everyone here almost, could talk all day and all night about what it's like to use a public restroom, right? Most trans people I know have a lot of difficulty getting the kind of competent health care and behavioral health support that they need in order to recover from an illness, let alone for their basic maintenance of their health. And finally, I also know more and more, we see there are stories of accepting families, accepting workplaces, and accepting towns and communities. But I have to say that I don't have a single trans or non-binary acquaintance who hasn't privately told me about times when they were either harassed, abused by their family, or by an ex, or a client, or a customer, or by their boss, or a neighbor, or a stranger on the street. Verbally, emotionally, physically, and for some, that abuse, as we know, is fatal. That must end. That must end, but how do we end it? What can we do? I know most of you here are committed to opposing transphobic violence and saying a loud, resounding, not one more murder. Say it with me. Not one more murder. Yes, and it is so important to say it. And I know that many of you understand trans murders are rampant because despite the truly important gains in recent years, transphobia is still everywhere in our society. Like racism and white supremacy, it's in the air. And it's systemic. And like I said, it affects housing and jobs and healthcare and public accommodations, bathrooms and all that shit. Yeah. Discrimination against trans people is deeply, deeply etched into the system. And why is it so ingrained? Because gender non-conforming people, we're proof that biology is not destiny, and that economic and social divisions based on gender are fucking arbitrary and unfucking necessary. And of course the system wants to make life hell for us. The tiny, wealthy few who hold the keys to economic and political power in this society, they got that power from the toil of poor workers and on the backs of oppressed people. They didn't work hard for it. They stole it from us. Yeah. And they have been playing a very sinister game with our lives. They enable right-wing politicians to whip up Bible-thumping attacks, like, for example, the Contract on America. Do you remember that in the 1980s and the 1990s? Against LGBTQ folks, against women and reproductive freedoms, and against people with HIV and AIDS. Because doing that made it easier for them to quietly chip away at the strength of the labor movement and other social movements. And then each time the queer resistance crescendos and feels like it's about to become unstoppable, they reach back across with their money and their foundations to politicians and nonprofits on the other side of the aisle, and they address just enough of our grievances to placate just enough of us that a further broad unity and solidarity is stopped from becoming a reality, and less of a mainstream priority. And what I want to suggest to you in answer to the question, what do we do? I want to suggest that we always make broad unity and the broadest possible solidarity with other people the priority. The priority. Every time we set out to speak truth to power, we should think about building solidarity. We won't end transphobic murders unless we fight just as fiercely against racism and police brutality with the same goddamn breath. We won't stop getting harassed about the gender markers on our documents unless we fight for all undocumented people at the same time. And we won't get quality, trans-competent healthcare unless we fight for healthcare as a right for all people at the same time and with the same breath. We won't have better jobs and wages for trans people until we win the right of every person to a job and a living wage. The Stonewall Rebellion of 1969 was ignited, as we all know, by queer and trans youth of color, who were already active in the struggles against racism, the struggles against the Vietnam War, and against economic injustices here in the U.S. that were raging in the streets in the late 1960s. So in truth, this is what the trans liberation movement is all about. Fighting shoulder to shoulder to bring about real change. Let's revive the spirit of the Stonewall Rebellion, and with the memory of our fallen comrades on these signs, let's fight like hell for real, lasting justice, solidarity, and power to all the people. Thank you.